Awesome. Well, I am super excited to be here. For those of you that I don't know, my name is Stephanie Licata, and I am a coaching strategist with Cloverleaf. My field is organizational psychology, and I've been using Cloverleaf since 2019 with individuals, leaders, and teams of all sizes, organizations of all sizes, large matrix organizations, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, one-on-one coaching for many years now, and use Cloverleaf now with probably close to thousands of individuals. And so I absolutely love Cloverleaf. And the number two thing that I also love is productivity and teaching people about productivity. And so I am going to be doing that in concert with helping you leverage our productivity assessment, which is an energy rhythm on our platform. And I'm super excited to do that. So I've been teaching time management to leaders and individuals for the good part of 15 years. And I am a person that really strives to maximize their time. And so especially at this time of year when we might have all of these sort of goals around doing things differently or not procrastinating and being more effective with our time. Especially in this new world we're in, where many of you are probably working from home, as I am. Some of you may be also part of a hybrid team, where some of you work in the office, some of you are remote, some of you may be part of a dispersed team, where some people are coming into an office in different locations, or there's people that are remote that don't report to an office that are in other locations, other continents, other time zones. And that's a lot to manage, especially when you're trying to plan a meeting or some kind of initiative. And we always have those folks who are in those difficult time zones that sometimes have to just, be on a call in the dark before the sun rises. And so we really want to just help you maximize the productivity, not only for yourself, but also within your entire team. And so I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit about the science of productivity to really give context for the energy rhythm assessment. So I'm going to share my screen in just a moment. And I will also, just so you know, I will be going back and forth between some slides and actually energy rhythm on the Cloverleaf dashboard. So again, if you're just joining us and you do want to bring up your own Cloverleaf dashboard to see your own ability to, look at your own energy rhythm result and some of the members of your team and their results, if you'd like to do that to personalize your experience of how I go along, that's something that I would recommend if you are a Cloverleaf user. So I am going to share my screen. You're going to notice that is my browser screen because I am sharing my slides, but I'm also going to be hopping on to Cloverleaf as well. So I'm just going to show you how I might go back and forth. And I'm actually going to collapse these other assessments so we can super hyper focus on this energy rhythm assessment. All right, so first, let's start talking about a little bit what we're going to cover today. So we're going to focus on a few simple things, right? So we're going to also first start with really uncovering the science of productivity and how to leverage your energy rhythm type for maximum individual productivity. So there is actually science of how we work best. Most of us are probably ignoring it. If you're in the United States, our work culture is countercultural to what the actual science is of how to be productive. The work culture that we have here can be challenging, and we've seen a lot of mindset and wellness and sort of different initiatives come into the workplace to help people really leverage their productivity, but also leverage some of that downtime as well. And really something I've always said as a teacher of time management is that more isn't always better. It's sometimes just more. So we think working more minutes on something is going to make it better. But really, if we're at the ends of our productivity cycle, we're actually not investing those minutes wisely. It's actually better to stop sometimes than to start. So the second thing we're going to do is to help you leverage your energy rhythm results so that you personally can do the right tasks at optimal times of day. So I do want you all to be thinking for yourself. You want to know what your type is. And if you want to, again, bring up your Cloverleaf assessment, You can do that. If you're not a Cloverleaf user, I will be sharing what the energy rhythm types are, and you probably will be able to identify that for yourself. Okay. And then the other thing we're going to do is to manage dispersed teams in different time zones. We're going to talk about that effectively by incorporating your energy rhythm team insights. And this may seem overwhelming at times. It may seem that, I know I always say, oh, I'm doing bad time zone math, right? I subtract instead of add, or I add instead of subtract. But just a couple of hacks I'm going to give you or how to plan a little better sometimes around using dispersed teams. All right, so we're going to be going forward, and I'm going to share with you again a little bit about the science of this. So who is this guy? This is Nathaniel Kleitman, and he is the father of sleep research. So way back in 1953, as a result of the work that he was doing, and with one of his students, he reported the discovery of what we now know as REM, rapid eye movement during sleep. And he suggested that the association of these eye movements was with dreaming. And the discovery is often described as sort of the beginning of modern sleep research, because it demonstrated that there were at least two major kinds of sleep, and that sleep included active brain processes. But what we often don't talk about is Kleitman also found that we have these same 90-minute patterns in our days too, as we move from higher to lower alertness, which is sometimes known as the ultradian rhythm. So during the day, the same way we have different stages of sleeping, we also have different stages of our alertness. And this is really, again, the science of being able to understand and read our body and our energy to do the right thing at the right time, right? There are actually certain times of day that are better for performing certain types of tasks. Now, if this is a subject that interests you and you want to go deeper into saying, well, if I look at my energy rhythm assessment, how does that impact how I'm going to live my life? Or how does that impact how I'm going to manage my day? So I do have a quick resource to suggest for you. This is called The Healthy Deviant. It's a rule breaker's guide to being healthy in an unhealthy world. This is by Pilar Gerissimo, and it speaks to the application of honoring these rhythms to be more productive and happy. So I'm going to be sharing some of the concepts from this book, and then I'm going to tie it right back into your energy rhythm assessment. So this is how we've been told we're supposed to work, right? And maybe haven't actually been specifically told this. This is kind of sometimes an unspoken thing in our minds. So we wake up, we go, and then we pass out, right? That we sleep, right? This is what we're told we're supposed to work. Like, be effective, wake up, be effective, go to sleep. This is how we actually work, right? We kind of go through these peaks and valleys, right? We have points of productivity, we have points of downtime, we have moments where you have that spare 10 minutes. How many of you, and you can use the reaction function, you can raise your hand or do any reaction. How many of you have actually taken that 10 minutes and said, oh, wow, I can actually take a break right now? So how many of you have discovered a free 10 minutes? Like, you get out of a meeting 10 minutes early and you take a break when you get it. When you have that break, you take advantage of it. So you can do a little raise your hand. If you find that extra 10 minutes, you take it. Yeah, absolutely. Natalie, Lisa, Cassandra, right? Erica, Ursula, right? You see that 10 minutes, you're like, oh, I can actually get something done, or I can take a break, right? And so when we are taking advantage of those unexpected moments that we get back, right? We've all been on those Zooms where someone says, I'm going to give you back 15 minutes of your time. And you feel like you just won the lottery, right? Some of you are going to take a break. Now, others of you are going to cram whatever you can into that 15 minutes. So raise your hand if sometimes you do that. You cram everything you can, you put all that stuff that you were trying to do, right, in that 15 minutes, okay? So now I want you to consider the next time you have that, the next time someone tells you, I'm going to give you back 15 minutes of your time, I want you to consider actually taking that break, right, at that time. That is a gift from the gods, the universe, whatever you want to say, for you to take a necessary break, because this is the way we actually are designed as human beings, right? So this is the basics. After about 90 to 120 minutes of sustained energy, output, and mental focus, the body and the brain actually need a 15 to 20 minute break. Now, this is why there are actually labor laws in the United States for some, retail jobs that say you have to give this many breaks. You have to give 2 15s and a 30, right? There are actually laws around this, right? We don't always honor them. And sometimes in the corporate world, we don't always honor them, right? Your systems use this downtime for recovery, repair, replenishment, and rebalancing, after which time they return to a high level of productivity and efficiency for another 90 to 120 minutes. So if we refuse to take a break when we need one, bad things happen, right? So what happens is we increase our stress, right? We get groggy, distracted, inflammation rises, immunity drops, mental capacity, metabolism, mood all suffers. We can't think straight, right? So our error rate actually increases and our productivity dips. Right? In other words, we start getting diminishing returns on the investment of our time. So that's why this more isn't always more better. It's sometimes just more. And the more ultradian rhythm breaks that we skip, do you see how it's like arousal, top performance, stress, and then there's recovery. And if we don't take those breaks, if we don't stop sometimes, right, to recharge, right, we are impacting the quality of the outputs that are coming from the investment of our time. So I'm just going to ask a quick question to the group, and you can pop this in the chat. What happens to you when you don't take necessary breaks? I spoke very broadly, but what happens to you if you don't take those necessary breaks? Now, I understand you might not have a full 15 or 20 minutes to do that, but what happens to you? Larry says, I may take a longer break later. Okay, absolutely, that's possible, right? I start to feel overwhelmed and anxious. I stop engaging or I lose focus, get overwhelmed, grumpy, right? Struggle with productivity, burnout, right? Headaches. There's actually physical implications. I'm exhausted at the end of the day. I'm angry, brain fog. I can be snappy, right? I grow irritated and I start pivoting, right? I want to touch on this. Tammy shared, I grow irritated and I pivot from one task to another aimlessly. This is what I call the mindless resorting, right? We get nervous or we get anxious. We haven't taken that break. We have a lot to do because we've all had the meeting that doesn't end 15 minutes early, that goes 15 minutes late. And what that starts to do is really give us a lot of cause for stress, right? So we've had those meetings too that go over when you don't have the space for that, okay? So we start resorting and redoing, and we don't prioritize. So these ultradian rhythm breaks are so important after about 2 hours of work. Even if you don't have the full 15-minute break to take, even if you take the 5 minutes, just 5 minutes to stop your activity and interrupt, you can dramatically impact your day. So these are also some suggestions for ultradian rhythm breaks. Just get up, get some hydration, right? Grab a healthy snack, avoid, refined carbs and sugars. This can sort of just contribute to the stress. Get outside and take a walk. Yes, even for 5 minutes. Those of us that do work from home, we know that a quick walk around our street or walk around our block can make a huge difference. Just getting fresh air, taking those deep breaths. Even if you only have 5 minutes, do it. Meditate or do deep breathing, visit with a colleague or a friend. If you're in a physical workspace, sometimes it's like, oh, this is the great time to go over to marketing and have that conversation. Get up and have a conversation. So even though you're still working, you're interrupting, right? You're interrupting, like sitting is the new smoking, right? You're interrupting and you're getting up and you're going to have a conversation. Actually use the restroom when you need it. I don't have to ask you to raise your hand, but I know that some of you are going from meeting to meeting and not using the restroom and then putting yourself on a bind. So actually take that time, that 5 minutes, to go and utilize the restroom when you need it. So these are just some suggestions. And if any of you have some other suggestions that you use for quick breaks that you want to pop in the chat, I'm sure people would love to steal some of your ideas and utilize them. If there are some ideas that you see here that you want to start to incorporate, I encourage you to do it. Here's the other thing. tip or trick. Now, I'm a person who lives or dies by my calendar. If it's not on my calendar, it's not happening. Oh, James, you brought up the Pomodoro method. The Pomodoro method is actually something I pulled out of this presentation because I didn't want to go too deep into it, but I will share with you what the Pomodoro method is. There are many different ways to do it if you Google it. Basically, it's taking a short breaks, short moments of productivity. So you may put a timer on your phone and you work on something for 20 minutes. Now, I recommend the Pomodoro method when you have a big, deep thing to do, like you're reviewing data or you're developing content or you're writing something. You work for 20 minutes, you take a 5-minute break, and you do 4 of those, right? So you do 20 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 minutes, 5 minutes. Some people do 30 minutes, 5 minutes. You take a 5-minute break after each interval. And then after the 4th 20-minute segment, you take the 15-minute break. So the idea is you're stopping and you're starting. For some of you, this may give you anxiety. No, I have to keep going. It does really work. I use it a lot when I'm creating content. So there are some great suggestions in the chat here. 5-minute yoga. By the way, there are a zillion free short yoga practices on YouTube. I'm a big Yoga with Adriene fan, but you can absolutely find a lot of free stuff on there. Mindfulness exercise, quick tasks. This is a great one, Kathy. If I'm at home, I might do a quick task like make the bed, change over the laundry. Absolutely. Do a task. If you are working from home, go and unload the dishwasher. Go and, call and make an appointment for your haircut, whatever it is. Do some, again, do something standing up at least once an hour, Christy. That's great. If you have an Apple Watch, it can remind you. Excellent tips. So again, if there's something you hear in what I'm sharing here or in what's being shared in the chat, I want you to grab it and make sure that you put it somewhere that's visible. So for example, when I'm going to take my breaks, I actually put it in my calendar. I'll look at my day and I'll block off 5 or 10-minute breaks, okay? Oh, that's a great one, James. Jigsaw puzzles are great time breaks for me, forces the brain to refocus. So if you have that ability, if you're working from home or even if you're in an office and you have that ability to have a puzzle, keep going. That's an awesome ultradian rhythm break. It takes your mind off something. The other thing you can also consider doing, I've done before, is I have a magazine or a book handy and I just switching activity, right? I might just read something that's not about my work for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And it just, again, it's a reset. Okay, so again, if you see anything here, grab it, put it in existence. Okay. Any questions before we move on? I want to give you the opportunity to dump a question in there. I'm happy to take some questions and we're going to hop on in to Cloverleaf. I wanted to give you this context first so you could really understand some of how we want to honor what our body's saying and how we want to honor just our differences and how we all might use or think of productivity hacks differently. But if you have any questions, pop them in. I'm happy to answer them. I'm going to be talking now about energy rhythm Cloverleaf and how you can really leverage it for your own personal productivity. So one of the things that I do is I do something called a Sunday night brain dump, and I will look at my calendar and bring up my Cloverleaf energy rhythm to help plan my day. But first, I want to help you understand how to decode a little bit of your energy rhythm by telling you a little bit about the different stages of our day. So if you want to design your day with peak productivity, you have to know what are the times that you are in your peak. So I'm going to go over all the different energy rhythm types and tell you which time of day is which for each person. So your peak is when you're at your most effective. Depending on your energy rhythm result, it may be different. During this time, you want to focus on analytical tasks that require the most thought energy. So these are things like reviewing data that you might have to create narrative for, right? This is sometimes something like writing where you really need thought energy to think of information and connect themes. These are things that really require when you're you to be at your most alert. Okay, your trough is when your energy dips. Now, the trough is not represented on our assessment, but you're gonna be able to notice exactly what it is. So the trough is when you're experiencing a slump. During this time, you want to do something mundane like managing emails or putting together a meeting agenda. Now, what would you guess for many types? What time or after what activity do you think most people's trough is? So pop in the chat. When do you think that trough really sets in for people? Answer that question in the chat. Yes, after lunch, after lunch, right? So there's this witching hour for many of the energy rhythm types. that you really don't want to schedule things in, right? That lunch hour or that time, I say lunch hour. I don't think anyone here has taken an hour for lunch in a really long time, unless we're like going out with a colleague or a client after lunch. Again, for some people, it is going to be late afternoon. It depends on your energy type. Then we have your recovery. Your recovery is your second win. So in this time, you leverage sort of a new burst of energy, but you want to use this more for creative tasks like brainstorming or team building. So if I hop on into Cloverleaf here, let's just focus a little bit on your sort of personal productivity. So you may want to look at, for example, you may want to look at your type first. You want to understand a little bit about your type. Most people are pacers. So this is our customer team, right? Most people are pacers, right? We've got our starter, who is usually super energetic even before work starts. And we have our anchor, who you might also call a night owl, right? So this is the way on Cloverleaf, this is the way sort of everything is depicted here. And I'm going to bring you into some of the individual activities. You can also find out the energy rhythm result of some of your teammates and kind of say, oh, it might be a good idea. It's okay to connect with Evan perhaps earlier in the morning because maybe, he's already raring to go, maybe even before work. So before we actually get to the individual activities, I'm going to pop back to the slides just for a moment to give you the peak, trough, and recovery of each type. Okay. So if you are that starter, right? Your peak is early morning, even before the workday starts, right? So starters are morning type people. They're energetic, excitable. They do their best work in the morning. They prefer to get an early start to their day. They tend to be the brightest and most exuberant in the beginning of that day. Starters likely work well in the typical flow of a 9 to 5 workday. Now their trough is 12 to 1 or usually after lunch, right? Now some people might not take lunch that early, but trough is usually 12 to 1 or after lunch. And their recovery is late afternoon, early evening. So remember that peak is, and when you do that deep analytical work, the trough, do something mundane, clean out your email. Recovery is late afternoon, be creative, do brainstorming, team building, right? You're still engaged, you're still energetic, but you probably want to focus on something a little bit more creative. So if you're a starter, this may resonate for you. You may have some differences here and there depending on the structure of your workday. Now, if you're a steady pacer, these are midday type people. Most people are right in the middle at the steady pacer. They do their best work during the morning or afternoon. They're the most common type. They tend to be happy, mellow, optimistic, easygoing with a steady energy. So their peak is mid-morning, right? That peak, that deep analytical work, it's good to do mid-morning. Their trough is mid-afternoon, also sometimes during that lunch hour. And their recovery is late afternoon, early evening. They are almost identical to the starter, right? Except their peak is a little later in the morning, right? So whereas the starter is getting their energy 7:30, 8 o'clock, they're raring to go. They're going to be the first one at the office. If you're going to a physical office, they're the first one on Slack or Teams, available, right? Or and that's the starter. The pacer is just getting that same sort of energy around like 10 o'clock, 10:30, right? So that 9 to 10 hour for the pacer, they're still getting into their workday, right? They might be looking at some emails, checking, again, Slack or Teams, whatever it is. They're still getting into the workday. And then 10 o'clock, it's almost like this little thing, this alarm goes off and they're like ready to like dive in, but they're still kind of sipping their coffee, getting used to their day earlier in the morning. Lastly, we have the anchor. And it's funny, in some conversations, this is a night owl, but the anchor, I like it as the anchor because it kind of makes me think of the team member who's kind of ready and alert later in the day and is a great person to connect with later on in the day. So their peak is late afternoon, early evening. So 4 or 5 o'clock, sometimes even as early as 3 o'clock, they're ready to go. They can really dive into some content creation. So I am an anchor, and around 3 o'clock, a lot of times if I have to create content, slides, training notes, if I have to do some deep writing, I will block off 3 to 4 o'clock or 3 to 5 o'clock. That's the time when I'm really going to dive into some of that work. Their trough is early to mid-afternoon, and their recovery is in the morning towards the start of the workday. So as an anchor, I do a lot more creative brainstorming, designing, a lot more sort of big picture work. I am sort of energetic in the morning, right? But I'm going to save that deep work for later, right? And I'm not going to schedule meetings with some of my team members for that later afternoon unless we're working on that deep work together. Okay, so if we look at individual productivity, I'm going to hop on the dashboard and I'm going to focus on individual problem solving, data analysis, and designing, right? So I'm going to hop on the dashboard, but I'm going to go to my me dashboard, right? Where I can see if I'm just sort of planning my day. So I mentioned to you that I go on to my dashboard on a Sunday night. And it reminds me when my peak is, my trough is, and my recovery is. So I'll just sort of get that reminder there. I'll go over to my team dashboard. And I love this drop down. So one of the things about this as I'm planning, by the way, I don't advise starting Monday morning on Monday morning. The Sunday night brain dump is one of the most effective strategies that I've ever used for time management. I literally spend 1 hour. I just look at my week. I jot down things that I have to do. I make sure everything's in my calendar. I also make sure to schedule interruption time, but I will actually come here, right? And sometimes I'll take, I have a lot of, some problem solving to do, some individual problem solving, right? And I may say, oh, but I've got to work on something, with Darren, or I have to work on something with Brian. Oh, he's at his peak too here, right? And that's maybe where I am, right? So, that's maybe when I'm going to schedule to do that. Or where do I fall here? Because, I'm working on this specific thing. So it's a good idea if you have to, plan something with someone else, or you have to do some individual problem solving, that you know where you lie here, right? And there's another good ways to look at the data analysis. So the times for data analysis, right? You want to see, again, where you are, what's the best place to plan that individual activity. And if you do have to involve another person, you also might want to see their peak. Now, what the interesting thing is, sometimes you work with people that have complementary skill sets to you. And maybe you're the big picture person, but someone else is the data person. You want to get them in their peak. And it's okay if you're in your recovery, right? But like, hey, I need some real help analyzing this data. And, her peak is in this time. I'm going to tap Evan to try to meet with her during that time, right? Maybe I'm having trouble with something and I need support with that. And I'm going to go to someone during their peak, right? Now, when we think of designing, we think of strategic planning, maybe designing a visual. If you're a graphic designer, maybe we're designing a project plan, but we're doing more of that high-level thinking, that design work, right? And so I want to make sure that I do that in recovery. Sometimes I forget, right, which topic is associated with either recovery or peak. And so I'll just go there and just glance at it. But when you're doing your individual problem solving, you want to try to do that during your peak, right? When you're doing your data analysis, you also want to do that during your peak. And when you're doing your designing, when you're doing sort of that big picture work, you want to do that during your recovery, right? And I sometimes, again, will just use that to just sort of do some planning. But where it can be even more effective is when I'm working with other people, right? So how do we impact team productivity? Now, before we get to this, I'm going to address the time zone piece, okay? So when you're looking at this, right, when you're looking at Cloverleaf, you're seeing this, but I can't make the assumption that each person is in the same time zone, right? So for example, if Allison, her recovery is 2 o'clock, right, but she's on Pacific time, right? That 2 o'clock is really maybe after my workday, because I'm on Eastern time at 5 o'clock. Now, there are some companies, now I work for another company that's on Central time. Their whole company works on Central time, right? So there are some companies that command their work hours to be on a certain time zone, right? There are other companies that don't do that. They have people working at all different hours. So depending on how your company is structured, I want to address sort of the one-on-one piece, right? So if I know that I have to do some brainstorming with Allison, I do want to catch her in her recovery. So I am going to think about her time zone and do that time zone math when I'm looking at this. So if I say, okay, I know Allison is in Eastern time, great, so am I, we have the same recovery, I'm going to count on doing some brainstorming with Allison there. So I realize that's sort of an extra step of thought. We do not do that kind of thinking. We just schedule meetings and send out invites and don't do that kind of thinking. That's why I do this thinking a little bit earlier, right? And so I do this, this thinking before my week or as I'm planning weeks out ahead. So I'll use the assessment a little bit more for planning things out than I will in the moment. And it's a great piece, a great just sort of extra cylinder to add to your time management strategy. So again, I know that time zone math is tough. So as we're looking at team productivity, a couple of pointers on doing that time zone math. One, consider the topic or agenda, right? So as you're thinking about, what I have to discuss with that person, just consider the topic or agenda, right? Consider the roles and expectations, right? So who are the people that are going to be on that meeting, and what are their roles and what are the expectations I have for them, right? So you're thinking about all of that. What's their role? For example, if you're having a meeting, a strategic planning meeting, and you've got someone who's the data person and you have someone else who's the strategic person, it's okay if they're in different peaks or recoveries because they're going to be contributing different things to the larger meeting. How can you optimize the timing for the most amount of people? That's all you can do is do your best. You're not going to be able to create everybody at the right time for the right task. That's not going to happen. So you sort of have to give that up and notice sort of the midday slump. If you notice that this here, I want you to just notice here, I'm going to go to brainstorming. So brainstorming has different people at their peak in recovery, but you notice there's nothing in this spot, right? There's nothing in this spot for people, right? Because this is the trough. It doesn't say trough, right? But this is why nothing is highlighted here, okay? So notice this midday slump, and sincerely, when some people say, oh, we'll do a working lunch. That is one of the worst ideas ever. Working lunches really are really productivity killers. And, even if you have to take a shorter lunch, it's better to do that than it is to try to take a working lunch. You will be more effective as a group if you meet when everybody's available 2 days later, right? Look, I know there are emergencies that happen, things happen, but if it's not an emergency, don't do working lunches. This really doesn't honor the natural human being and the way they function in the world. It really just creates increases in cortisol, stress, anxiety. Like, let people actually take lunch. Even if they're not having lunch, let them take that break, okay? So notice the midday slump, don't plan things in there. And all you can do is, it's okay to have a combination of peak and recovery, especially for something like team problem solving. So I'm over here, right? And it's okay. Now, if I'm doing brainstorming, but I need a few people that may also have some of that deep analysis piece, it's okay if I schedule a meeting in the afternoon where I've got some people at their peak, right? And I say to myself, well, what is Bob's role there? He's in his peak. And so he may really be able to think more clearly, strategically, thinking from the data. It's okay to have a combination of people. It's okay to have a combination of peak and recovery. And you just ask yourself, what's each person's role? Again, what's the expectation? What are we talking about? Oh, this is a good mix because we've got a bunch of people in recovery, but we have a couple people that are at their peak, and they might be the people that could be, the people that, synthesize the meeting at the end and share the notes or whatever it is, because they're really focused on following everything, right? So it's okay. You don't have to have it perfect, right? But it's just good to identify some of these things when you are, again, planning, doing longer term planning. It's a little bit hard to do this if you already have a meeting that's planned and you didn't think about it. So it's good for longer term things. It's also good if you're going to plan a cyclical meeting. So if you're going to have a regular meeting with a group of people, and that meeting is for ideas, you want to make sure that more of those people are in recovery than not. right? If a meeting is for reviewing data, you want to make sure that more of those people are in their peak than not. So think again, think about the topic, think about the agenda, what's the purpose or the outcome of the meeting. All of this stuff, you may say, Stephanie, that's great, but I don't have time to do this. Whenever we say that, we really do settle for this level of status quo, right? Taking 5 minutes in the planning of your meeting to think about this stuff takes the quality and the outputs just up to another level, right? So you have to think to yourself, I can't afford not to do this thinking, right? I can't afford not to bump up the quality of the time when I'm working with everybody. I want to get everybody in all together at the best time. Okay. So these are some other types of activities that I'm going to pull up on the dashboard in just a moment. I'm going to talk about brainstorming, which I just actually touched on. I'm also going to touch on collaborating, giving feedback, which is super important. And I'm going to give you a big tip about this one, and also reviewing performance data. So I'm going to hop back on to the dashboard. So we already talked about brainstorming here, right? So we've got, yes?
Real quick. We have a question that says, can we go this way? Morning trough, midday recovery, afternoon, evening peak.
Yeah. So again, if that is your natural cycle, it's okay to honor that. It's important to know for yourself, right, when those times are to plan for yourself, right? So if you don't feel represented by your energy rhythm type and you just have a different way of working, that is completely fine, right? It's completely fine to do that. And so the afternoon, evening, if that's your peak, you're most likely an anchor, and you've just swapped out the trough and recovery, right? So you're most likely an anchor anyway, and you may just have a switch of how you start the first half of your day. Okay. So we talk a little bit about brainstorming in terms of, again, if your meeting is about ideas, you want to have people more in recovery. It's very similar with collaborating. If you'll notice here, this collaborating is sort of getting the best of everybody, right? And so you'll notice that getting people in their recovery is key. So if you do have to have a bunch of people come together to collaborate on something where maybe they're all sharing a piece of information, this is, again, you want to pay attention to doing that in recovery. Now, this is probably the most important nugget that you're going to get, because this is one of the most difficult pieces of communication in a workplace, and it's giving feedback. So when I say giving feedback, tell me one word that comes to mind. Pop it in the chat. And I say giving feedback, tell me one word that comes to mind. Pop it in the chat. Giving feedback. What's one word that comes to mind when I say that? Giving feedback. I want to see what's on your mind. Ooh, it's offensive. Uncomfortable, constructive criticism, conflict, right? So giving feedback is almost as bad as when your partner says, we have to talk, right? So giving feedback conjures up all these sort of emotions, very similar to what people shared here. So I wanted to share with you two things. When you're giving someone feedback, I want you to consider the nature of the feedback. So for example, if you're about to review data with someone, and you need their deep thinking, and you're going to be giving them feedback, you want to think about the energy rhythm type of the receiver, right? Because of what we just said, right? Uncomfortable. Now, Lisa has an awesome perspective on it, learning experience. That's the way I see it as a learning professional too, but for many people, it is uncomfortable, right? You always want to focus on the energy rhythm type of the receiver when you're giving feedback. And then think about what type of feedback is it? If it's feedback on analyzing data, we've got to understand this data. We have to understand this concept where it requires that person, let's say a person made a mistake because they didn't understand something really important that's part of their role. And you need them to be a little bit more cerebral. You want to get the receiver of their feedback in their peak. Okay, get the receiver and their feedback when they're their most alert. Okay, so if you're giving feedback that's a little bit more transactional, tied to a specific transactional result, get the receiver in their peak. Now, if you're giving someone feedback about something that's a little bit more interpersonal, a little bit more behavior based, not so much on a specific result, I suggest doing it in the recovery, right? So the recovery is when people are in their creative state. And if you do want it to be a learning experience, you want to use the coach approach as you're giving that feedback to ask them something like, what do you see you could do better in the future? Or how do you see you might handle this again if faced with that? So you want to get people in their design thinking, their sort of brainstorming, because you want to be doing a little bit more coaching, right? And it's coaching about behavior and interpersonal stuff requires creativity, right? So again, if you're reviewing data or concept, right, you need them to understand it, have them be in their peak. If you're doing something that's a little bit more creative, interpersonal, right, have them in their recovery. But again, you want to deliver the feedback that's optimal for the receiver based on the topic. This can dramatically impact how the feedback is received. So if you need me to understand something difficult as you're giving me feedback and you don't catch me in my peak, that might not be the optimal time to give me that feedback. Now, as always, you want to have feedback be timely. So if you have to pick a day, just pick the right time of day. Now, the good part about this is it's a little bit, if you have a time zone difference, it's not like you're coordinating a meeting with 12 people and you have to think of their 12 time zones. Always think of the person's time zone and then look at their peak and recovery based on the examples that I just gave. This is so super critical. These conversations can be challenging enough. Why not slide them in at the times of day when are most optimal for that person to do their deep thinking, okay? So again, super critical. This is, again, something I would definitely put into practice. I don't know when, everybody's performance process is a little different. You may be, doing sometimes people do the year before reflection in the new year. Some people have already done it. Some people may do it, sometime in Q1. So if you can incorporate this into your official performance process, awesome. But as we know, feedback is something that should be ongoing, happening regularly. Nothing that anybody hears in any kind of performance conversation should ever be news. So if you can incorporate this into any type of feedback that you have to give in your one-on-ones, or even if you do need to schedule a meeting with someone to talk about something specific, make sure you use this tool to really support you in scheduling that meeting at the most effective time for that receiver. Now, if you are working in a group and you want to review performance data, or you want to test a new procedure, so you're working in a group, you want to review performance data, right? And we all know that everybody has different responses to data and different responses to change, right? So this is about understanding data and testing a new procedure, right? Something's going to change in how we do things, right? So these are times that are challenging for people. So when we look at reviewing performance data, the system's actually telling you, keep people in their peak. So if you do have time zone disbursement in terms of your team, get as many people that are in their peak as possible when you are reviewing performance data. So what does this mean? Data at the end of a campaign, data at the end of a project, data that results from maybe a survey that's been done to either an external survey or an internal survey. Make sure you schedule the meeting where the majority of the people or the most amount of people are in their peak, because you're asking people to understand, analyze, think at a deep level. Now, if you're testing a new procedure, if you're rolling out a new software platform, if you're introducing a new process, if you're rolling out a new initiative, let's say you've started a new performance management initiative and you're rolling that out, you want to get as, let's go to test a new procedure. Right? Again, you want to get as many people. Do you see how recovery is not even represented here? You want to get as many people in here at their peak. Here's why. Here's the difference between adult learners and child learners, right? So those of you that are learning professionals, we all know adult learning is a whole different ball of wax than teaching young people, right? So young people come in, they're just like sponges. Like when I say young people, I'm talking about 10 years old, right? They're just like sponges, like, oh, I'm learning new math things. And they don't have a lot in their past. They've only been on the planet for 10 years. Adult learners, whenever you give something to them that's new, they are bringing with them all of the years of their experience, and they're searching for an experience that they can compare to what you're giving them, because they want to feel safe and secure. 10-year-olds are like, oh, I don't even know this, so great, let me know, like, let me learn. Right now, some of us are as exuberant adult learners. We still come to life this way. We're lifelong learners. But for many adult learners, they're going to be frustrated. If I can't compare this to something I'm already an expert on, it's going to be frustrating. So when I'm testing a new procedure, again, I want the most amount of people in their peak, because adult learning can be a frustrating experience. So if you want me to learn a new tool, you want me to learn new software, you want me to learn a new process, you want me to learn some new messaging that our company has that I have to ingrain in my brain and it's new, you want to honor two things: their energy rhythm type, and you want to honor the adult learner, right? Because that's how adults are approaching information. All right, I know I just gave you a lot of information, a lot of different ways that you can utilize the information about energy rhythm on the Cloverleaf dashboard. So I want to open it up to questions. If anyone has any questions at all, pop them in the chat. I will try to get to them. Any questions at all? Any questions at all? You can pop them in the chat. Anything that may be triggered for you about, hey, what happens when we do this, or what happens when a team is ready to do that? How can we utilize this assessment? But you can pop it in the chat and I will be happy to answer it. While people are popping in the chat, if for some reason you are not a Cloverleaf user, I am going to just sign out of my account here. This is my Cloverleaf account. I'm going to go to Cloverleaf here. And I am actually going to give you the link to a free trial. A free trial requires absolutely no payment, no credit card, no nothing. So if you're not a user and you do want to get started, you can do that. You get access, unlimited teams, unlimited dashboards. This is only if you're not a user, but I did just put the link there if you want to get that 14-day trial. I did that. If you're having a technical issue with not seeing the energy rhythm on your Cloverleaf platform, that is something you might want to talk to your admin, your Cloverleaf admin about. So you do want to address that with them. Unfortunately, I don't have access into different people's accounts, but ask your Cloverleaf admin and they should be able to support you there. And if for some reason they need support, they can always reach out to Cloverleaf for support. Any questions though? Anything else, Melanie or Heidi, that you want to share that maybe I didn't say? Let's see, we have a question here. Okay, any questions at all?
Laura, yeah, I will look into, I would say if you have access through an organization, just get with your organizational admin and they can get you access. I believe, I'm looking up, it looks like you're under Bostwick. So I can, if you reach out to, I'll have to look and see who your administrator is, but I'll pop my email in the chat as well if there's any particular questions in general. And if your administrator is working with Melanie or one other, we'll get it to the right person. But here is my email. If you've got questions on access and stuff like that, happy to share that and we can get that information to you. The only thing I was going to mention, I'm going to throw in the chat a link to our next assessment training over DISC, which is February 24th at 12:30, I believe. I think I just looked at that. Let me double check. 12 o'clock. 12:30, I'm sorry. So yeah, 12:30 on the 24th, that's Eastern time. We'll have a DISC review and we'll have Brad Schneider with the growth coach of Central Ohio will be presenting on that one. So I will send you I'll put a registration link here while Stephanie's answering those questions. For those of you that are coach or consultants, we will have another webinar next week going through creative Cloverleaf dashboard debrief strategies. That is at 12 o'clock next Friday. And I will also put a register link in there as well for those of you who are coaches and consultants and would be interested in doing that one. We will be having something in that, something that will go for our coaches and consultants each month as well. And we've so far gotten one scheduled through the first quarter. What we're doing is basically coming up with what real life people need, like right now, like what's the current topic that you're needing access or, answered for your coaching and consulting business. So I haven't scheduled, we'll probably schedule those probably a quarter at a time. Whereas the assessment, we have those scheduled for a while. We will also be sharing a calendar of events here shortly. We're figuring out the best place to put that on our website. So more to follow on that, but so there'll be more webinars in general coming up as well. So keep an eye on for any of that.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Heidi. I do want to touch on the 2 questions there. Nancy has any tips to figure out when you're most productive during the day? So if you've taken the assessment and, that assessment can obviously give you sort of a little bit of a blueprint, but what I would recommend is when you take the energy rhythm assessment and it tells you when your peak, trough, or at least your peak and your recovery is, observe yourself during the day, and just for 1 or 2 days, write down like sort of the times you felt most alert, write down the times when you really felt tired, start to just observe yourself and do a little bit of a time study on yourself for 48 hours. And if you want to even do it a little longer, for like maybe a whole work week, you'll start to notice different things like, oh, I seem to always get tired here. I seem to always perk up here. You'll start to notice things. So if you can do a little time study on yourself, the other thing you can do is use the free version of a time tracking tool called Toggle. All you need is the free version. And just as you do each activity during your day, say what it is and keep track of all your time. At the end of the week, it'll give you a report, and even track when you're going for your 10-minute walk. And you'll look at that report and you'll be able to reflect back and see when you were most effective. So again, Toggle is a free time tracking tool. And if you want to just study yourself and study where you're spending your time, it's also a good way to see where you're not delegating something. And so again, just do it for a couple days or a week, and then you can start to plan better in terms of being productive. So Christy, I am an anchor. So she's asking for advice on anchors in a very 9 to 5 culture who loves morning and early afternoon meetings. So I totally get it. Where I would say, Christy, is for yourself, if you have certain pieces of work that you're going to do better later in the day, and I'm always very upfront with my managers around this, and I'll say, I am more of a night owl. I'm going to maybe do some work later on in the evening. Is that okay? If I do that and maybe I for some reason don't start work at 10 o'clock. And I have those conversations with people. Now, I know that's tough if the culture doesn't allow it. But what I would do is anytime you do have the ability to impact a meeting time, make those requests. Sometimes we're afraid to just ask for what we need. So if you have the ability, I've suggested changing meetings at times, because it's in a time when it really doesn't work. And if it's something that people are open to, just test it, right? So it's really about communication and asking for what you need, which I know is challenging sometimes, especially if the culture makes it really tight, but try to maximize, again, your own planning and really do that Sunday night brain piece so that you're utilizing your own energy, the energy that you do have the control over at the best times. All right. Well, I wanted to really end 5 minutes early to be able to say, I'm giving you back 5 minutes in your day to prove my theory, but I'm probably only going to give you back 3.5 minutes. Still, do not do anything in those 3.5 minutes. Take a deep breath, take a stretch. Don't start a new task. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Melanie and Heidi also for your supports, and have an awesome, productive January and rest of your year. Bye, everybody.